Welcome back to San Diego, people. I'm Alan Denton. Nathan Fletcher is the frontrunner on the Democratic side in the supervisor's race in District 4. He joins me now with a look at some of the issues that he feels strongly about. Nathan, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Yeah. Let's start off the mayor's race. You ran for mayor.
Right.
Some of the political pundits said, you know, you lost that race, you'd be out of politics,
Sure.
you know, for good, probably, or maybe not. But for the supervisor's race, why did you decide to get back into politics, and especially the supervisor's race?
Well, my heart's always been in service. You know, I grew up in a very working class family. My stepdad was a factory worker, but my mom, who was a tremendous influence on my life, ran shelters for battered women and children and tried to help others. And when I came out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps. I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, where I felt like I was serving and helping others. Came out of that, I went to the state assembly, where we know we did. We passed Chelsea's Law, dozens of other bills that helped homeless youth and helped people keep their health care. We know we made a difference. And then, you know, we lost the mayor's race. And I still wanted to serve, and I've continued to do that. We've helped with our deported veterans. We've helped with mental health services for veterans. But along the way, I came to the realization that if you're willing to endure what you have to go through in a campaign, being in elected office is still where I believe I can have the biggest impact. And I'll give you a specific example. When we're trying to provide mental health services to our returning veterans, you can raise money, you can do nonprofits, you can do things, but when you look at the fact that the county of San Diego is sitting on over $160 million of available but unspent mental health funds, there comes a point where if you feel a drive to help veterans, you almost have an obligation to get in a position where you can do the most good.
Why do you think they haven't spent that money? I mean, the county, as I was talking earlier with one of your opponents, I mean, the county has stockpiled a ton of money here, and they've done a great job of, you know, hanging on to that money from the standpoint of a rainy day fund, I guess, or whatever.
Right.
But yet there are so many needs out there.
Well, the mission of county government is not to stockpile money.
Yeah.
They're not a hedge fund, and they're not a bank, and that's not their mission. Now, they have an obligation to be fiscally responsible. And when I was in the state legislature, we inherited horrible budget deficits from previous administrations, and we had to deal with that. And so no one is more in tune with the need to have appropriate reserves. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is an entity that has a culture that doesn't focus on how do we do the greatest good for the greatest number, and how do we really drive, and how do we lead, and how do we fight, and how do we invest in our neighborhoods? How do we invest in mental health care services? You know, I have a comprehensive plan to tackle the homeless crisis in San Diego, and if the county would step up and do its job, we would see a lot more progress on that issue. And so I think that there's a culture at the county that has to change, and I think it takes a new generation of leadership who have experience in legislating and governing and leading and pushing and getting things done, but who are come in and are willing to really drive and push. And that's the opportunity that got me back engaged.
And with that experience as a state legislature, I mean, what are you going to bring to the table? You mentioned some of the things, but I mean, there's a whole list, I know, on your website of issues that you would like to confront, aside from homelessness and veterans.
There's a host of things. And, you know, one of the interesting things about the county is so much of what the county does is areas that I legislated on and have experience for this.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about, you know, the county has a budget, I was involved in helping negotiate 4 separate $100 billion budgets. I know how to do that. And we delivered for San Diego time and again. We know how to do that. When you look at the county does law enforcement, we author Chelsea's Law, a true one-strike life without the possibility of parole for violent offenses against kids. We're going to carry forward that commitment to make sure that our families and our neighborhoods are safe, but we're also going to make sure that we believe in justice and redemption and rehabilitation. We're going to make sure folks who make a mistake in their life are afforded a pathway back to a productive future. When you look at the environment, you know, we all care. We have such amazing natural resources and treasures here. The county has a huge obligation to play with ensuring clean air and clean water. When you look at it, we talked about the homeless crisis. The county can play a lead role in housing affordability and in transportation. And so in a host of issues where we think the county can make a more substantive impact in the lives of residents of San Diego and investing in our neighborhoods and getting things done, we have a track record of having delivered time and again that prepares us well to do that.
You've switched party affiliations from Republican, Independent, now to Democrat.
Yep.
How much does that matter to voters, do you think, in this particular race?
Well, look, I walk door to door every day, and most voters don't care. Voters that I talk to say, you know, political parties change and people change. You know, they said what we want is someone who's going to get in there and lead and push and deliver results. And, you know, I'm comfortable as a Democrat, and I've been a Democrat for years now, and am proud to be endorsed by the Democratic Party, along with a host of really well-respected Democratic leaders. And I think that bodes well in this district in particular, but also when we look at the contrast between a Board of Supervisors that has a monolithic approach in terms of all 5 Republican. I've even had Republicans tell me, yeah, but we need a contrary point of view. We need someone who's pushing them to invest more in children, invest more in seniors, invest more in mental health services and getting people off the street. And so I think the voters are ready for change at the board.
Been a huge uproar over sanctuary cities. Of course, Governor Brown is, and the state legislatures has put California in a position of being a sanctuary state. But when it comes to a sanctuary city, we're seeing a lot of communities bailing out right now. Santa Clarita was one most recently. Of course, San Diego County. Where do you stand on this? How do you feel?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think like a lot of issues in politics, the facts and substance behind what we're talking about are often lost. And the reality is what the state of California did was provide a list of over 800 violent felonies where local law enforcement will still turn those individuals over to ICE and immigration. And so this isn't an issue of protecting us from dangerous violent felons, because there's over 800 violent felonies that the local law enforcement will comply with ICE. What we're talking about in this case is this is the job of our local law enforcement to go about rounding people up and checking their immigration status. And that's why most law enforcement officials will say, no, these policies of Sanctuary City actually make our cities safer. I've been teaching, I'm a professor at UCSD, I've been there for 5 years. A colleague of mine, Professor Tom Wong, Dr. Wong, did an exhaustive study and quantified that sanctuary cities are safer. And the reason they're safer is because every resident who lives in a city needs to feel comfortable going to law enforcement. So let's say that your child was injured in a crime, and the witness to that crime is an immigrant. Well, if they're fearful of local police because they think they're immigration officials, they're not going to go as a witness. My mom ran shelters for battered women and children, and there was no sign out front of the shelter that said, we're going to check your immigration forms before we accept you in and give you compassion and care. And so what we're talking about here is not violent felons. Those folks should be dealt with. What we're talking about here is having our local law enforcement focus on providing local law enforcement to keep us all safe and let the federal government do their job.
But what about when it comes to allowing people into this state or any other state without the proper channels, going through the proper channels of becoming a citizen of the United States? I mean, and that's what we're hearing quite a bit about. A lot of people are really standing up on this
issue. And the federal government, when I was at Qualcomm, we assembled this amazing group of folks calling for comprehensive immigration reform. Standing with us was law enforcement, were labor leaders, business leaders, Farm Bureau, faith leaders, and we all said we need a comprehensive fix to our immigration system. And I think we agree with that, and Congress should do that. But in Congress's failure to get the job done, they shouldn't be taking our local law enforcement that have an obligation to protect and serve our communities and having them backfill the federal government's responsibility.
You're often characterized as pro-union. Is this going to hamper your ability to control the costs, say, for instance, with the county or policies of the county?
No, not at all. And the reality is we have an incredible erosion of the middle class in America. And that middle class is what allows the American dream. People can work hard and advance and have success. And that erosion of the middle class coincides directly with an erosion in the number of union workers. And the problem in America today is not that companies aren't making enough money. The stock market's at record high. Corporate profits are the highest amount. The problem is hardworking folks are seeing their wages go down. They're working more hours. They're working longer and harder to make less. And so I think we need to stand up for working families. And I think we need to push and we need to promote and we need to try and help them. And, to put it in context, the Board of Supervisors doesn't have a problem spending money or giving raises to themselves. This is a board that voted themselves a 19% pay raise while they offered their workers a 1% raise. Now, I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. I don't think supervisors should take anything that they haven't offered to their workers first. When I was in the Marines, we always said officers eat last. You take care of those you're responsible for first. And I'm going to fight for those county workers. And I'm going to fight to make sure they're treated fairly. They're public servants. You have county workers who are eligible for the services they provide. And I just don't think that's right. And of course you can do that without bankrupting the county. You can make fiscally wise decisions.
We've got probably less than a minute. The difference between you and your opponent, Bonnie DeMantis, who's leading on the Republican side, go down the list. What's for a voter who's saying, okay, do I vote for Bonnie or do I vote for Nathan?
Well, I think it comes down to this. I think if you think that what the county's doing now and the way they're doing it, their level of commitment, their energy and their focus, if you think that's okay, then you should probably continue the status quo. But if you want a supervisor who's going to get in there, who's going to lead, who's going to push, who's going to drive to have more funds invested, who's going to fight for our neighborhoods, who's going to work to make a difference, then I think that you should elect someone who represents that change and that different approach and that different vision and a commitment and a willingness and a track record of time and again delivering results, which we showed in the State Assembly.
All right. Great to see you, Nathan.
Good
I'm
to
sure
see you.
we'll be talking to you more as we get closer to
It's coming
the
soon.
primary. All right. Good deal. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.